Alright, sa video lecture na ito, pag-uusapan natin ang petty cash fund. Ano ba itong petty cash fund? Petty cash fund is a fund or a money set aside to pay small expenses. So, sinet aside ito ng isang company para pangbayad sa mga small expenses like advances to employees. Kapag bumali ang mga empleyado mo, doon mo kukunin sa fund na yon. Or mga office supplies, doon natin kukunin yung pera na ibabayad natin o ibibili natin ng mga office supplies. Another one is transportation, gasoline, postage stamps, and other miscellaneous expenses. Yung mga pwede nating bayaran from that fund na mga small expenses. Hindi na natin kailangan mag-issue ng checks just to pay those small expenses. So, magsiset aside tayo ng fund, ng money para sa mga small expenses na yon. So, itong petty cash fund, meron tayong taong designated to take care of this fund. And ang tawag sa kanya ay petty cash fund custodians. So, ang custodian, siya ang namamahala ng mga expenses na ito. There are two systems of this petty cash fund. So there are two systems of our petty cash funds. We have the impress fund system or the fluctuating fund system. Isa lang ang gagamitin mo. It's either the impress system or the fluctuating system. I will write down kung ano yung mga examples natin na mga expenses na ginagamit natin ang petty cash fund. So, ito ang mga examples natin na mga expenses na ginagamitan natin ng petty cash fund. We have the advances to employees, office supplies, transportation, gasoline, postage stamps, or any other miscellaneous expenses. So, ang gagawin ko dito is write down to all the transactions na pwede nating ma-encounter dito sa petty cash funds, like establishment of the fund, kung paano natin i-establish ang fund, ang petty cash fund, kung paano tayo mag-disburse or mag-entry kung meron tayong expenses na dapat na i-entry natin, at replenishment or how to increase our petty cash funds or how to decrease our petty cash fund, and at the end of the year, ano ang mga adjustment natin using our impress fund system or fluctuating fund system. I will write down all the entries using the impress system at fluctuating system side by side para compare natin. First, we are going to establish the fund using the impress fund system and the fluctuating fund system. Para side by side, nakikita mo kung ano ang difference ng kanilang mga entries. On establishment of the fund under impress fund system, our entry is debit to petty cash fund and credit to cash in bank. Ang entry natin is debit to petty cash fund and credit to the cash in bank. So, aalisin natin from our cash in bank at ilalagay natin yan sa ating petty cash fund. Then, under fluctuating fund system, parehas lang ang magiging entry natin when establishing the fund. So, we debit our petty cash fund and we credit our cash in bank. On disbursement, ang disbursement is kapag nagbayad ka ng mga expenses. That is disbursement. Sa disbursement, under impress fund system, wala tayong entry. Memorandum entry lang. Ang memorandum entry is you make a memo na nagsasaad na kumuha ng pera from the petty cash fund para pambayad ng whatever expenses na na-incur. Let's say, for example, office supplies. Bumili ka ng mga office supplies at kinuha mo yan sa petty cash fund. Ang magiging entry mo under impress fund system ay memorandum entry lang. Under fluctuating fund system, kapag nag-disburse ka ng expenses from petty cash funds, ang magiging entry natin sa fluctuating fund system is debit to the expenses and credit to the petty cash fund. So, binabawas mo na kaagad sa petty cash fund na account mo. So, yan ang big difference between the impressed fund system and the fluctuating fund system. Ang pagre-record ng mga expenses under impressed fund system, memorandum entry lang. Then, on fluctuating fund system, nag-entry ka na kaagad kung ano man yung expenses na yon. Alright? So, we debit our expenses and we credit our petty cash fund. Binabawasan na natin agad ang ating petty cash fund. Then, replenishment under impressed fund system is debit to the expenses and credit to cash in bank. Ang replenishment is i-replace natin yung expenses na incur na natin sa petty cash fund. I-restore natin yung petty cash fund. I-entry na natin ang mga expenses na na-incur ng impressed fund system, then we credit our cash in bank. Under fluctuating fund system, ang entry natin is debit to the petty cash funds and credit to the cash in bank. Increasing the amount of the petty cash fund naman, and let's say for example, ang petty cash fund natin ay kailangan pa natin ng more petty cash fund. To increase the amount of our petty cash fund under impressed fund system, our entry is debit to petty cash fund and credit to cash in bank. Ganun din sa fluctuating fund system, kapag mag-i-increase ka ng amount ng petty cash fund, our entry is debit to petty cash fund and credit to cash in bank kapag mag-i-increase ka ng amount. Kapag magdi-decrease ka naman ng amount ng petty cash fund, let's say for example, marami ang petty cash fund mo, hindi nagagamit yung ibang amount o ibang cash sa petty cash fund, then we will decrease the amount of our petty cash fund. So to decrease the amount of the petty cash fund under impressed fund system, we will debit our cash in bank and credit our petty cash fund. Ganun din sa fluctuating fund system. Alright, kapag magdi-decrease ka ng amount of your petty cash funds, our entry will be debit to cash in bank and credit to petty cash fund. Babawasan natin ang petty cash fund at ibabalik natin sa cash in bank. So, yan ang ating decreasing the amount of our petty cash fund. At the end of the year, mag-a-adjusting entry tayo. Under impressed fund system, meron tayong magiging entry. Kung makikita mo dito sa impressed fund system, hindi tayo nag-entry kapag nag-disburse tayo ng expenses or nag-disburse tayo ng petty cash fund. Memorandum entry lang tayo. Unless magre-replenish ka, you're going to record the expenses of the replenishment. Pero at the end of the year, yung mga expenses na hindi natin na-replenish, magkakaroon tayo ng adjusting journal entry. At ang adjusting journal entry at the end of the year is debit to expenses and credit to petty cash fund. Dito sa impressed fund system, ang entry natin at the end of the year, yung mga hindi na-replenish na mga expenses, i-record natin. Our adjusting journal entry will be the debit to expenses and then we credit our petty cash fund account. Under fluctuating fund system naman, wala tayong magiging entry. Bakit? Kasi every time na nagdi-disburse tayo ng mga expenses, nire-record natin kaagad. Kaya ang ating petty cash fund na account ay nag-fluctuate. Alright? At the end of the year, under fluctuating fund system, wala tayong entry. or wala tayong adjusting journal entry under fluctuating fund system. So, ito ang petty cash funds. Ang petty cash fund, money set aside to pay small expenses. Mayroon tayong dalawang system. It's either impress fund system or fluctuating fund system ang gagamitin ng isang company. Under impress fund system, nag-entry lang ang company kapag nag-replenish or at the end of the year, tsaka siya mag-entry ng mga expenses. There will be adjusting journal entry. Dito naman sa fluctuating fund system, kaya nag-i-increase or decrease ang ating petty cash fund na account kasi every time nagdi-disburse, gumagastos, kumukuha ng pera from the petty cash funds, ini-entry ka agad ng custodian or cashier. So we debit our expenses and we credit our petty cash fund. Kaya kung titingnan mo dito sa fluctuating fund system, nagpa-fluctuate, nag-i-increase or decrease ang account na petty cash fund. Yan ang system ng fluctuating fund system. So dito sa impressed fund system, kung makikita mo, ang petty cash fund ay hindi nag-i-increase or decrease unless nag-increase ka ng amount ng petty cash fund or nag-decrease ka ng amount ng petty cash fund. So this is the difference between the impressed fund system and the fluctuating fund system. Pag-usapan naman natin ang entry kapag si custodian ay nagkaroon ng shortage or overage ng ating petty cash fund. Usually, ang kinakount natin or binibilang natin ay ang ating petty cash fund. Kinakount nila ang petty cash fund monthly, pwede rin quarterly, or maybe annually. So, kapag nagkaroon ng discrepancy or the difference between the cash count, yung nabilang na cash versus the cash to be accounted for, nagkakaroon tayo ng either shortage or overage. Ang shortage ay kulang ang cash count or kulang ang nabilang na cash. Ang overage naman ay mas marami kesa sa cash to be accounted for. Meron man discrepancy between the cash count and the cash to be accounted for, ang gagawin natin, magkakaroon tayo ng temporary account na tinatawag na cash shortage or overage. So, itong cash shortage and overage na account ay temporary lang. Just to record kung merong cash shortage or cash overage. Ang petty cash funds ay binibilang ng ating company, pwedeng monthly, quarterly, or annually. Usually, it's monthly. So, the company will compare the cash count and the cash to be accounted for. Kino-compare natin ang cash count versus the cash to be accounted for. Kapag may siyang discrepancy, magkakaroon tayo ng shortage or overage. Kapag kulang ang cash count, nagkakaroon tayo ng shortage. Kapag ang cash count naman ay mas malaki kaysa sa cash to be accounted for, then nagkakaroon tayo ng overage. So, nagkakaroon tayo ng shortage kapag ang cash count ay kulang versus the cash to be accounted for. Or, nagkakaroon tayo ng overage kapag ang cash count ay mas malaki kaysa sa cash to be accounted for. So, ano ang mga entry natin kapag may discrepancy between the cash counts and the cash to be accounted for? On the shortage, ang magiging entry natin or adjusting journal entry natin sa shortage is sa shortage, ang magiging entry natin is debit to cash shortage or overage. Itong temporary account na ito, ang gagamitin natin to account for the shortage. We debit the cash shortage or overage and credit to cash. Alright, babawasan natin ng cash kasi kulang yung cash count natin. Alright, sa overage naman is we debit our cash. Sa overage naman, nasa credit side. Alright? We debit our cash kasi sobra yung cash natin, cash count natin. Then, we credit our cash shortage or overage na temporary account. After our adjusting journal entry on the cash shortage or overage, we will try to see kung anong reason kung bakit nagkaroon ng discrepancy between the cash count and cash to be accounted for. Kapag ang reasons na nagkaroon ng shortage or overage ay sa shortage, kapag ang reason na nagkaroon ng shortage is the custodian or the cashier, nakakuha siya ng pera from the petty cash fund. Then, kapag ganun ang nangyari, i-adjust natin ngayon yung account na petty cash fund. So, ang magiging entry natin kapag ang responsible sa shortage of the cash count is the custodian or the cashier, ang magiging entry natin is debit to due from the cashier and credit to the cash shortage or overage. So, para ma-close natin yung temporary account na cash shortage or overage at ang responsible sa shortage na ito ay yung cashier, ang magiging entry natin is debit to due from the cashier and credit to cash shortage or overage. So, para ma-close natin yung account na yan. So, sa overage naman, kapag ang overage ng cash count ay pera ng custodians or cashier, then ang magiging entry natin is debit to the cash shortage, i-close na natin yung temporary account na yan, and then credit to payable to cashier. So, ang magiging entry natin is debit to the cash shortage or overage. Close na natin ang temporary account na yan and credit to payable to cashier. Alright? Kapag overage siya, mas malaki ang cash count kaysa cash to be accounted for. Then, kapag ang reason ng shortage nito ay hindi responsible ang custodians or cashier, debit to loss from cash shortage and credit to the cash shortage or overage, yung temporary account na yan. If the company tried everything pero hindi niya mahanap kung bakit nagkaroon ng shortage, ang gagawin ng company is i-recognize na lang niya ito as a loss from shortage. Our entry will be debit to loss from shortage and credit to cash short or overage na temporary account. Ma-close natin yung temporary account na yan. Then, we will recognize a loss in our income statement. Dito naman sa overage, kapag hindi naman ito pera ng petty cash custodian or the cashier, ang magiging entry natin is debit to cash shortage or overage and credit to miscellaneous income. So, ganito ang ating cash shortage and cash overage. And the company will compare the cash count versus the cash to be accounted for. Kung magkano talaga ang dapat na laman ng petty cash fund natin. Kapag merong discrepancy between the cash to be accounted for, nagkakaroon tayo ng either a shortage or an overage. At ito ang mga entries natin in a different situations. Kapag may shortage, babawasan natin ang ating cash kasi kulang nga. Kapag may overage naman, magdadagdag tayo ng cash kasi nga over. Then, we will have our temporary account na cash shortage or overage. Kapag shortage, nasa debit side siya. Kapag overage naman, nasa credit side. Then, mag-iimbestiga ang ating company kung bakit nagkaroon ng discrepancy between the cash and the cash to be accounted for sa petty cash fund. Kapag nalaman na ang responsible for the shortage, sisingilin natin ito from the cashier kapag mayroong shortage. So our entry is due from cashier, and kapag may overage naman, payable to cashier. Then, i-close na natin yung account or yung temporary account na cash shortage or overage. Kapag ito naman ay hindi na mahanap kung anong nangyari sa shortage or overage, sa shortage, i-recognize na natin as a loss from cash shortage. At yan ay pre-present natin sa income statement. Then, i-close na rin natin ang cash shortage or overage. Sa overage naman, magre-recognize tayo ng miscellaneous income. Alright? So, ito po ang ating cash shortage or overage. I'll see you on my next video.